What's happening, Bills Mafia, and welcome to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. Of course, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Right below, you can see first, last, as well, the X handle. I'm still not quite used to that statement, but I had to let it be known that that is where you can find me on the X machine, not the Twitter machine. I'm going to call it Twitter. You know what? I'm throwing in the towel. I'm calling it Twitter. Twitter will live on forever. This show is presented, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast is presented by, you guessed it, 26 shirts. Stop in, buy a t-shirt, goes to a great cause. Of course, wanted to plug 26 shirts as well, plug the fact that Del Reed was on the 24/7 Buffalo Fandemonium show with my boys, the 24/7 Buffalo Fandemonium crew last week. That was awesome to get the chance to, hear from him and hear all things in regards to 26 shirts. I'm looking forward to getting him on my podcast soon as well. It's been a while since I've talked to Del, so definitely looking forward to that. So appreciate you guys and gals hopping on tonight, Wednesday night, as I love to bring the takes in regards to our beloved Buffalo Bills. What a week 5 was. I love the fact that this show is on Wednesdays because it gives me a little bit of time to let a win marinate, let a loss marinate, and provide the best course of action to take after a game like this one. If there was ever a course of action to take, we start off with the fact that the Buffalo Bills fall to 3-2 at the hands of the Jaguars by a score of 25-20. And this game was a tough game to watch. This game was a tough game to digest for the time that we watched it, as well, wondering just how much would this game impact the future of this season for the Buffalo Bills. The Bills lost a lot more than just a game. The Bills lost arguably the best player on their defense, one of the best inside linebackers, maybe the best inside linebackers, and the banged up Bills, as I'm going to call them, as a shout out to the man that is Kyle Trimble, that's been on my podcast multiple times over the years, a great buddy of mine. He runs a great site, bangedupbills.com, where he writes articles about banged up Bills. And I got to tell you, I was on Facebook Live from the Jeep, running some errands on my day off, and Columbus Day, Monday, and I just had a few things to say just in regards to this season in the National Football League. This doesn't just pertain to the Bills. It does pertain to the Bills, but it pertains to the National Football League as well. I can't remember a single year where I have seen more players suffer devastating injuries at the level that we've seen this year. And I'm talking about some of the best. I'm not just talking about, player here or there that, players get hurt in this game every single week. But these are noteworthy players. Nick Chubb, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Milano, Anthony Richardson now. I mean, there's been several. Austin Eckler is out. Justin Jefferson is out. I have never seen a year quite like this one where this early in the season, 5 weeks in, we're seeing all these guys go down. And no less on one team, you go into this game against Jacksonville, traveling out to London. And I'll talk more about this in a little bit, but traveling out to London, knowing that you're not going to have Greg Rousseau, knowing that you're not going to have Trey White for sure, that was tough. And then what happened was even tougher to watch. The moment that Matt Milano went down, which was very early in the game, the broadcast of Rich Eisen and Kurt Warner didn't necessarily show the play happen in live time. They circled back to it, showed the replay of when it happened, and Milano being carted off the field shortly thereafter. And you could tell that took the wind out of the sails of like Von Miller, of Terrell Bernard, of guys that are close to Matt Milano, that understand the importance, Jordan Poyer as well as Micah Hyde, that have played with Milano since he came onto the team a few years back and understand the importance of Matt Milano to this defense. This is not just any other loss. You can't just sprinkle in any other player and expect that player to take the level of play to the level that of Matt Milano. A massive, massive loss to this team. And it's funny because you go back, and I don't say funny, haha, funny, ironic. You go back to a year ago, you had Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano. Those were the main two, linebackers for this team in this 4-2-5 set that Sean McDermott runs. And a year later, 5 weeks into the season, you have Terrell Bernard, who was the backup to Tremaine Edmonds, and you have Dorian Williams now, the rookie, who was drafted to spell Milano in certain situations, to give Milano a breather if Milano needs it, which he rarely does, and to play situational, moments in games defensively, more so special teamer his rookie year. Now, both of these guys have a massive, unique opportunity that neither one expected to have. And yeah, part of me is curious to see how that challenge is handled. And coming off of this loss, I'd like to state that I think, in my personal opinion, and maybe it's just recency bias here, but in terms of Sean McDermott this past week and the challenge ahead, I'd like to state that I don't believe there'll ever be a time to date in Sean McDermott's coaching career, X's and O's wise, that is as challenging as this one. Because not only is Sean McDermott regulated back to calling plays on the defense, he's doing so with a defense that he didn't expect certain names to be playing on it. He only expected guys to stay as healthy as they could. You plan for injury, yes, but you never plan for this many injuries 5 weeks into a season. And it drastically changed this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It drastically changed the idea that the Buffalo Bills could intimidate, could thwart, could outspeed, out physical, the Jacksonville Jaguars, much like the Bills had these last 3 weeks against the last 3 week opponents that they played, especially Washington and Sam Howell. They could not do that to Trevor Lawrence. Difference in quarterback talent for sure, but difference in our defense as well. You cannot underestimate the loss that is Matt Milano to this team, who is announced to be undergoing a season-ending surgery. As well, the loss of a defensive tackle in Daquan Jones that really looked like the yin and the yang to the yin to yang that was needed for Ed Oliver to produce at the level that he needed to. And it takes two to tango with that defensive tackle position. I've been saying it for years. You need to have not just one dominant athletic defensive tackle, but you need to have a fundamentally sound defensive tackle lined up next to him in order for those guys to both kind of feed off of one another, flush that center of the pocket, allowing the defensive ends like Greg Rousseau, who wasn't playing, as I mentioned, Von Miller, who's just getting back. So this was a proverbial train wreck of a moment for this defense. And I got to tell you guys, with all that being said, what happened was massive, unforeseen defensive changes on the fly. But what really happened as to why the Buffalo Bills lost this game was the slow start by both sides of the ball, but especially on offense. 7 points in the first half. 7. 1 touchdown in 2 quarters. When you got Josh Allen, when you got Gabe Davis, when you got Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, and James Cook as your starters on this offense. 1 touchdown. This defense played their tails off. This defense, despite all the issues that they had faced throughout this game, was honestly remarkable. And yes, eventually the dam kind of broke, but we only lost this game by 5 points. I am shocked at that. This game could have got a lot uglier, a lot quicker, and it could have got a lot uglier even later in the game. It could have just been an outright thumping by the Jaguars to the Buffalo Bills, and it wasn't, because this defense played extremely hard. I think a lot of that has to do with Sean McDermott's ability to call plays on defense. We've seen this defense improve while he's been given the task to, of course, help it, call plays on it, of course. But man, I honestly, I am flabbergasted by the perception of this game that the defense was not good enough, that the offense was doing things well in the second half, but the defense didn't. I've read tweets that have just really made me scratch my head at what people are watching. I've watched this game with a fine-tooth comb for as long as I can remember. And this defense, the Bills defense, despite the injuries, played about as well as they possibly could against a very good team. Granted, we should have won this game. If Buffalo's offense would have gotten off to a quicker start and didn't go 3-and-out, 3 straight drives in a row to start the game practically, what felt like it, we would have won this game. Time of possession was extremely lopsided. Jacksonville had over 40 minutes time of possession. We had about 20. Just it can't happen. Can't happen with this team as what we know as this team is and can be. I will say this is not just a loss against a team that is a bad team. You know, the Jets have a good defense. Their offense is really bad. With Zach Wilson, he's not Aaron Rodgers, right? So that one stung for that reason. Jacksonville's a good team. I've looked at Jacksonville as a team that is on the rise. They have a solid young quarterback. Travis Etienne is a really dynamic runner. They bring in Calvin Ridley last year while he was on a suspension. He's young still. He's got a lot of tread on the tires. And then that pass rush was very tough for Buffalo to stop. This was the first week this season outside of week 1 where the Bills' offensive line had a tough time. And Ken Dorsey in the first half especially seemed like he had a real tough time getting a rhythm going via the play calling. They couldn't get the run going at all. I look at the stat sheet, Bills by the numbers, as I like to call it. Josh Allen was this team's leading rusher, for Christ's sakes, at 4 carries at 14 yards. James Cook finished the day with 5 carries for -4 yards. That's four less yards than me or you, and we're not lining up for the Buffalo Bills. We would have a better yards per carry than James Cook while not playing. I'm being facetious. I'm joking here to an extent, but in a literal statistical sense, I'm not wrong. So that's a problem. The fact that the Bills couldn't even establish any sort of a run game, you cannot win football games in this league if you cannot run the football at all. You have to be able to run the football to some effect, to some progress, to have any chance whatsoever to win games in this league. I don't care what era it is. I don't care if Mahomes is throwing for 500 yards a game. At some point, Pacheco is going to get a run, and it's going to be a big one. And that one big one is the dagger, is the fourth nail in the coffin, whatever you want to call it. The Bills could not do that. They could not run the football. Anytime you're one-dimensional on offense, you will not win against a good team. You might against the Washington Commanders, but you won't against a team like Jacksonville. And I do believe, spoiler alert here, I'm just throwing this out there. This is a team that the Bills could see again in the playoffs. And I hope that we're at that point where we've won the AFC East. I don't want to go to Jacksonville. I'm not saying Jacksonville's got a crazy home field advantage. They don't, but Jacksonville's a weird team. They're sneaky good. They have not fulfilled their full potential yet, but you have to be able to run the football. And Buffalo could not do that. I appreciate all the comments coming in. Tim Giles, that's a name I haven't read in quite some time. What's up, Tim? I could be wrong, but in my opinion, it's to fault of all the artificial turf fields there is these days. And a lot of players are agreeing with your sentiment, Tim. Teron Johnson being one of them. Said after the game that the artificial turf is a problem, and that's why these guys are getting hurt at the level that they are. Listen, I hate artificial turf. I think it's one of the silliest, uh, honestly, dare I say, cheapest ways to effectively put a football field, a semblance of a football field together. They know that, they meaning the NFL, but they're doing the artificial turf because it's easier to shell out. It's easier to put together. I would think, though, that natural grass would be less money. But then again, there's articles out there that are saying that natural grass would be more money. So I don't know on that one. I am indifferent. You know what I mean? I'm not indifferent to the change. I'd love them to change it, but I'm not a grass expert. You know, like that's not what I'd refer to myself as. I just like to make sure my grass is short. But at the same time, jokes aside, um, I think there's something to this thought. I think that there will be a change made. Too many players are coming out saying this needs to change, and I hope it does. Kevin Hui says 7 points to their 11. What a weird score that was at halftime. 7-11. I wanted to run to 7-Eleven and grab a Slurpee and drown my sorrows after watching that first half. It was terrible. That first half, they had no urgency in that first half offensively. They looked sluggish, and that does go to the thought that many people have that they should have got to London earlier. That was a gaffe by this organization to leave on a Thursday, get there on a Friday, play a game on what was essentially a Sunday morning local time was a huge mistake, massive mistake. And granted, the NFL gave Jacksonville a distinct advantage by allowing them to stay another week in London prior to this game. That's something that the league has to address in a different way next year. If the NFL is going to go about doing all this, international bull, and I'm going to just call it that, call it as it is. If the NFL is going to do that, they got to do it right. And they have to do it in a way that's fair for both teams that are playing in games. Every team that's playing in these games, it has to be fair for every team. I don't know how they make it fair, but if they want to do it, if they want to move forward with this as their process and try to make the league an international league, then make it fair for every team that's playing, not just one team or the other. Every team, every single team. Next week we got the Ravens and the Titans. I'm sure that this will mess up their schedules, at least one of these teams' schedules at some point later in the year. It's a very silly concept that you have a league that is referred to as the National Football League, the Nations Football League, the America Nation League, essentially. And you have teams pocketing in London. You go back to the Bills playing in Toronto, which was an unmitigated disaster. New Mexico, Mexico City. It doesn't work. It brings more eyes to the NFL, granted, but what is the plan? Ultimately, is the plan to have a team in London? Is the plan to have a team in Toronto? If it is, say that. Doesn't seem like that's willing to be said. And that's very annoying. It makes it look as if the NFL is greedy. And we already know that they are. But at the same time, make it fair. Just make it fair. If you're going to do that, I'm not even against it. I actually love the UK. Like it's an awesome fight city. The soccer, all that stuff, the real football as they call it. I have nothing against London or Germany or any of these countries that want to watch NFL football. It's not the fans' fault, but the NFL needs to do it right, and they have not since they started this whole process. So that's something that I'm throwing out there too. I had to put my 2 cents in on that. So, as I mentioned, a very challenging week ahead and weeks ahead. The challenge ahead for Sean McDermott, I can't understate it or overstate it enough. I'm very curious to see how he is going to coach this defense without guys like Milano, Trey White. There are some holes on this defense without those guys. I'll just be blunt. A player that I questioned as to whether or not he wasn't playing or why he wasn't playing these first 4 weeks was Kaiir Elam, former first-round draft choice out of Florida 2 years ago, not that long ago, obviously. And yes, he was terrible on Sunday morning against Jacksonville, our time. He was not a beneficial player to the Bills. We'll just put it that way. You could say a liability. You could throw the Ryan Gosling, remember the Titans meme out there. But he was a liability. He should not have played as poorly as he did, but there could be a few reasons for that. I don't want to really rip the guy apart because I like him, first off, as a player. I think a lot of it could be because he hadn't played at all since training camp and was inactive, practicing but inactive. So maybe we'll see a better version of him this week, but he is going up last week. He was rather going up against Calvin Ridley, and that's not a small task. He's a very underrated, skilled wide receiver, and I just question the fit. I question the fit of the player to the scheme, to the team. I'm curious to see what happens with him, and that's something to keep our eyes out on. So, any questions at all, throw them my way. Kevin says, do you think Allen should have checked or audibled out of some of those runs? It's always a curious one with audibles and stuff because some offensive coordinators give a quarterback more authority over that. And then some offensive coordinators just want the play to be ran the way that it's called. I think it became apparent that the Bills realized we cannot run the ball, so why are we even trying? And when that happened, they stopped running it. It was like every down, pass, 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 pass. You're doing 50% of the defense's job for them by not calling a balanced offense. That's the way I've always looked at it, and that's the way it is. So that's my take on that. Maybe he could have. I don't know. That's not one that I can confidently answer. So, yeah, and Kevin asked about Elam. I do believe Elam was bad because he hadn't played. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in that regard, but he was bad. Like, I'm not sugarcoating it. So if he's bad against Jacksonville, and then he's bad against the Giants, we got some problems. What's telling, though, is that in a moment where the Bills needed a stop, they regulated the bottom corner on their roster to a big play rather than Elam. So much so that bottom-wise, I can't even remember the guy's name. And I know this team like the back of my hand, but he was a late addition to this team in season that they decided to put out there instead of a former first-round draft choice. That is a massive miss by Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott if this does not work out. There is no equivocal way to say it other than saying if Kaiir Elam is traded at any point in the next year or two, it's a massive miss by Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. And I think it's a mistake to move on from him. I'm not ready to give up on him yet, but it seems like they kind of are, which is really shocking and not good for their future. It means the corner is probably the top priority position of this offseason. And you could see that happen again in the draft or potentially trade, free agency. And here's something that I definitely wanted to touch on. With the loss of Milano and the loss of Trey White and the loss of Daquan Jones, a lot of people are questioning local media people and Twitter people. You know, they're saying, oh, should the Buffalo Bills trade for somebody? Let me tell you guys something. We're not playing this game, this multi-billion-dollar league, with monopoly money. They're playing it with real money. Real money is being shaken and moved around. I know everybody's aware of that, but oftentimes it's like people think that this league is Madden. It's not, unfortunately. It's not. Um, you have to abide within the confines of the salary cap. What move justifiably with the Buffalo Bills salary cap situation, what it is, what can the Bills do with this team right now? Who could they go get? They told us. They answered my question already. They went out and they signed Josh Norman, 35-year-old end of the road corner that knows their defense. Great. That's why they signed him, but he's 35. He was let go from the Bills for a reason. They go out and sign 33, 34-year-old AJ Klein. Those are the types of moves that this team can make. To put it in perspective, they don't have the funds to go out and trade for a Patrick Surtain. They don't. They don't want to further create an avalanche for the future by restructuring yet another contract. I don't think they should. Granted, this was the year that we all wanted to be the Super Bowl year, but they have a lot of things stacked against them right now that I think you would be fooling yourself if you thought that this was a Super Bowl winning scenario with the odds stacked against them. This is a very tough situation for this team. There's unequivocally no way to say it. This team has gone through a bevy of injuries that not many teams experience in one season, let alone in 2 weeks' time. Back-to-back all-pro players out for the season. Three of them starters. Three of them starters, two of them all-pros, Milano and Trey White. They're older on defense with Poyer and Hyde. I love those two guys to death, but they know that the clock is ticking. Secondary problems galore. Dane Jackson, you never know what you're going to get. Christian Benford, you never know what you're going to get. Kair Elam, you certainly never know what you're going to get. And, I was very frustrated as a fan to sit there and watch that game like sand in an hourglass and watch it just drain away that clock and see Von Miller standing on the sideline with his hat on. It pissed me off. I'm not going to lie. It really did. And maybe it's because he's not ready. I get it. I know why he probably wasn't playing. It probably because he's not ready. But it pissed me off because we need him to play. If he's eligible to play, he needs to be out there. Whether he's in the best shape or not, doesn't matter. He needs to be out there. He's paid to play. He's not paid to wear a hat. So it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I think that, if there's one thing that I would change, Tim, I got to tell you that there's no way to really change this team into what. How do you make it better week 5? These teams are already, set in stone. So who is out there that they could sign? I don't even know. Who would be willing to sign for a short-term deal? Brandon Beane said it himself. He said, I'm looking for guys that are willing to take less money. Football players aren't willing to take less money. They're not. This is not hometown discount NFL anymore. This is not discount NFL anymore. It's not discount sports anymore. So you go across the way to another sport, for example, the Buffalo Sabres. They have their home opener tomorrow night. They're starting an 18-year-old player in Zach Benson. Meanwhile, there's a 34-year-old player, free agent, that's won 3 Stanley Cups, named Patrick Kane, who the Sabres could have and probably should have. They could now, and they probably should have already gone out and got him. But they want to keep this youth movement going. I'm not against it. I'm not saying they're wrong. I do think they should sign Patrick Kane, but it's another topic for another podcast. But they can't make those moves because they're not willing to pull the trigger. The Bills would be if they were in the situation financially to do so, and they are not. They're paying Matt Milano top dollar because he's great. They're paying Trey White top dollar because when they gave him the offer, he was elite. Injuries happen. Trey White, another injury happens for him. Matt Milano, an injury happens for him. Devastating. Devastating. I've known multiple athletes in multiple sports that have suffered the same injury that Matt Milano has. None of them played football, and none of them were ever the same athlete that they were prior. I'm just going to say it right now. I don't have a good feeling about it. I don't feel good about this injury. Breaking your leg, shattering your femur bone, and tearing your knee at the same time is not good. So I appreciate you guys hopping on here and provide me all these questions. I do think they're going to get back on the right path. I do think that they are going to win against the Giants on Sunday Night Football, and I do think it'll be a blowout because the Giants are so bad. I mean, they're terrible. At some point, there is going to be chatter that Brian Daboll should be fired, especially after winning Coach of the Year, which was an award that he should not have won. And I think in time, people will see that. But I got the Bills winning that one at home. I think it'll be a 30-point win, 30-10, we'll just say. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Go Bills, and I'll see you next Wednesday.